Okay, so now we have our different icons showing. I'd like to attach a click event to the trash can so that when we click on that, it deletes that project. So let's attach a click event to the delete icon first of all, at click, and set that equal to some kind of method. I'm going to call this delete project, but call it what you want. It really doesn't matter. Now down in the component object, we need to create the methods property, and then inside that, our delete project method. Now, what do we want to do inside here? Well, we want to send a delete request to JSON server to a certain endpoint to delete an item from the project. So before we do that, I want to store the endpoint, and I'll call it URI, inside our object right here. And that's so when we're using a fetch request later on, we don't have to type it all out inside that, because we might use several different fetches for several different tasks. We have edit and done right here. So we might alter them in different ways, and I don't want to have to type out the endpoint several times. So I'm storing it once here so we can reuse it. So the endpoint, if we open up the terminal to the project's resource, is this thing right here. So I'm going to copy that and close down the terminal, and I'm going to paste it in right here. Now the endpoint to delete a certain resource is not just / projects, it's / the ID of whatever project we want to delete. Now we have access to that because we have the individual project. So I could tack on this.project.id. Remember, the ID is a property of each project. So that's the endpoint to delete an item. Now we need to send a delete request to that endpoint. So then, what I'm going to do down here is use the fetch API again, and I'm going to pass in this.uri to reference this thing right here. That's the endpoint. But this time, because we're making a delete request, we need a second argument, which is an options object. And inside there, we need a method property to say that this is going to be a delete request. Now this could be post, it could be get, which is the default, it could be patch, etc. We're making a delete request. So this fetch right here, this makes a delete request to the JSON server at this endpoint. The JSON server will then look for that project with this ID inside our project's resource, and it will delete it. So let me save this first of all, and before we try it, I'm going to copy all of this stuff right here. And the reason I'm copying this is because we're about to delete data, and once we've deleted it, it won't be in here. It's going to edit the file. So I don't want to have to retype out that data later on. I can just paste it back in now. So now let me go over to the project, and if I try to delete one of these projects, then nothing happens, right? It's still here. But if we go to the DB file, it's gone. So why is that change not reflected in the browser? Well, think about it. When we make the fetch request to get this data, it was when the page first loaded, when this component was mounted to the DOM. Now, once we delete a project, we then don't try to refetch the data. And so therefore, we don't update this project array. So it's still here locally. It's been deleted inside the db.json file, but the data is still the same locally inside the home component right here. We've not edited that data. We made the fetch request before we deleted it, and after we deleted it, we've not made a further fetch request, so this is still the same. So we've deleted it in the db.json file, but not locally, and we've got two options here. We could either, after we make a delete request, send a further fetch request to update the data, or what we could do is we could just update the local data to keep it in sync with the db.json data. So if we delete something like this, we then look at the local data and also delete it from there. And that's the option we're going to go for, because then we don't have to make any further network requests. So we need to think for a minute how we're going to accomplish this. Because when we delete a project, we then can't access this data from this component. So we can't just update it right here inside this delete project method. But what we could do is we could emit an event, such as a delete event, for example. That's a custom event. And then listen for that delete event over here. We attach that delete event to the single project. Then when that delete event occurs, we could fire a function inside this component to update the projects. So that's what we're going to do. So down here, I'm going to attach a then method to this, so we can fire a callback function once we've deleted it from the db.json file. So once that is complete, we could tack on a then method to fire a function right here. Now, we don't need to say we want the response and then JSON because we're not doing anything with the response now. Instead, all we want to do is emit a custom event to say, hey, we've done the delete now. Now what I want to do is emit the event so you can delete the data locally as well. So we'll say this and then $emit. This is how we emit a custom event. And then inside that, we give our event a name, and that's going to be called delete, but you can call it what you want. And the second argument, which is any data we want to send along with the event, and that is going to be the ID of the project that we're deleting. We need the ID over here because we're going to use it to take it out of this data as well. So let's pass in this.project to access the project and then the ID property on that. Okay, so I also want to attach a catch block to this as well, which is going to take in any error if there is one, and we can just log that to the console like so. Okay, so now we're emitting this custom event. We need to listen to it inside the home component right here. So we can say @delete, that's the name of the event, and set it equal to a function. I'm going to call that handle delete. All right, so now we need to make that down here. We need our methods property first of all, and inside that there is going to be a handle delete function. And remember, we take in any event data automatically, and that is the ID. So this thing right here, and we're calling it ID. You can call it what you want, but it is the ID, so I'm calling it ID. We get access to that as an argument, and all I want to do is filter the project now, and I want to take out the project which has this ID. So we've seen the filter method, and also if you struggle with the filter method, definitely check out the last chapter of this course. There's a whole video dedicated to it there. So what I'm going to do is say this.projects is equal to, so we can update the value, this.projects.filter, fire a callback function for each item in the array, and we're taking the individual project as we do that, and we want to return a boolean. If it's true, we keep the item in. If it's false, we filter it out. So I want to return project.id is not equal to ID. So what we're saying is, okay, well, if the ID of the project that we're cycling through is not equal to the ID of this, then this is going to be true, and I want to keep that one in. It's only if the IDs are equal, this will be false, and in that case, we filter it out. So then this filtered array is being assigned to this property right here, and it will no longer contain that project. So now what we're doing is keeping our local data in sync with our DB data over here. All right. So then let me paste back in all of the data. I'm going to save this and I'm going to go try this again. Let me refresh to get all of the data. And now when we click on one of these, it should be deleted over here. And when it's done, it will delete locally as well. Press delete and voila, it works. All right, so that's one icon out of the way. Next up, I'm going to show you how to complete projects using this tick icon.